I'm glad to have Georgia Fort. She is an independent journalist out of Minneapolis. Really impressive bio, so I'm going to read some of it here. Georgia Fort is Georgia Fort. Let me, if I can find it, is a two-time Emmy-nominated journalist. She was one of two journalists in the courtroom for the sentencing of Derek Chauvin. Her reporting has been published on CNN, ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS. Her mission as a storyteller is to change the narrative by amplifying truth, citing diverse sources, and contextualizing social justice issues. Georgia, I really appreciate you taking the time because I know you're all over the place covering the protests of Amir Locke's murder. I wanted to just ask from a basic level. Amir Locke, who was 22 years old, sleeping on a couch, it was a no-knock warrant that a SWAT team rammed through the door, kicked the couch that he was sleeping in. By my viewing the video, I mean, he was a legal gun owner, but I mean, it doesn't even look like he had time to even know what the hell was going on because it was early in the morning. This happened less than 2 years after George Floyd. This happened, I believe, less than a year after Dante Wright. Can you kind of talk about this? I mean, I guess it's a basic thing, but it just seems like it's deja vu over and over and over in Minneapolis. And we're getting lip service, in my view, from the mayor, the police chief, and the usual suspects.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jordan, thanks so much for having me. It has been a very tense time here in Minneapolis over the last week. Tomorrow will actually mark 7 days since Amir Locke was fatally shot. And we've seen thousands of people out in the streets protesting, demanding that Officer Mark Hanneman be terminated from his position. In addition to that, the way that the interim police chief, Amelia Huffman, and Mayor Fry have handled this police killing, now communities demanding that they either be terminated or resign from their positions as well. And so the big question here, because we are in the center, or what was the epicenter for police accountability following the murder of George Floyd, the question everybody is asking is what's changed? At a moment when the entire world was watching, we know that there were international protests that happened after George Floyd was killed, and the world was looking to Minneapolis for two things: one, fundamental change, and then two, a blueprint for a way forward with policing that would produce more equitable outcomes. And it appears that you look at not only Amir Locke, but Winston Smith, which didn't make national headlines. He was killed after Derek Chauvin was sentenced, but before Kim Potter's trial happened. And so you have Winston Smith and you have Amir Locke and all of the other names that most people don't know. Why does this keep happening? And what is being done from political leaders, from those at the police department? What is being done to prevent this from happening again? And we have not gotten a serious answer to that question. And even the answers we have gotten have proven to not be true because it keeps happening.
Right. And another thing, I mean, let's not forget Breonna Taylor was a no-knock warrant. I've interviewed her aunts a few times in Louisville, Kentucky. The police originally lied about that. Minneapolis police originally lied about what happened with George Floyd. They said it was a medical incident. You correct me if I'm wrong, but initially after Amir Locke was murdered, I believe the interim police chief said they believed that he was pointing a gun at officers, even though the video, as far as I could tell, does not show that. And the other thing is, separate from the no-knock warrant, I mean, you look at that video, first of all, Amir Locke was not the subject of that search warrant, but B, they rammed through the door and immediately kicked the couch, and it's like their immediate thought is force. It's not, kind of going in, in a de-escalated fashion, not, announcing yourself to be clear police, so people will be able to get their kind of wits about them at early morning. So it seems like it's not just the no-knock warrant; it's the absolute Rambo force they're using as they get in there. Because I think most people sleeping, it takes you a few seconds to kind of get your wits. You don't know who it is that's ramming into your home.
That's right. Well, I think what I have observed in following most of these killings and the court proceedings that follow, what I've observed is a culture that lacks transparency and a culture that lacks accountability within the Minneapolis Police Department. And the way that the department works together hand in hand with the media to perpetuate a narrative that is always, almost always, in their favor, right? Immediately following. And so, what we have to start to do, is the folks who are defending these actions and these deaths, how do we break through the noise and get them to see that there's cover-ups that are happening, right? And I know for some people that feels like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, but we've watched this played out. I mean, the facts and the evidence are there. I'm a journalist. I'm looking for fact-based evidence to report on. You can go and Google that original press release about George Floyd. John Elder, the Minneapolis Police Department's public information officer, put that press release out where he said that George Floyd died from a medical complication. You saw the footage. We all saw the footage. We know that's not what happened. Additionally, you watched the trial and you know that is not how the judge ruled on the case. So it was a lie. And what is the consequence for public officials who lie? Where is the accountability? And so I think that we have to truly start to examine not just when officers use fatal force and whether or not it's justified and whether or not they should be charged criminally. We also have to examine the standards and the process and the practice that follows these killings that have allowed them to happen historically. And because now these things are coming to light, because now we have, at least here in Minneapolis, two public accounts of when the Minneapolis Police Department has lied, just blatantly lied, right? We have that's documented, that now we should be questioning other cases that have happened in this city. And there should be a consideration, a serious consideration of reopening previous cases where the Minneapolis Police Department used fatal force. And I know other people in other cities will say the same thing is true in their city. And like you pointed to the example with Breonna Taylor. And so if this isn't just an isolated thing that's happening just in the Minneapolis Police Department, but we have reports and stories that are coming out of several large cities across the country, then we have to start to admit as a nation that we have a national crisis here with public safety and policing that has to be addressed.
Right. And I'd also want to point out, beyond just the police, it, it's kind of, I mean, Minneapolis activists, residents, community members, they worked to ban no-knock warrants. And by the way, Louisville activists did the same thing. So the question is, why are they still executing no-knock warrants? Why was this executed? They say it was part of a separate homicide investigation, but what is the role if activists are continually petitioning their local government, their state government, to ban these kind of, I mean, not that no-knock warrants is the only problem here, but that's the mechanism they're using. But the police are still able to do that, then it kind of, from a local community activist member, just a Black person in Minneapolis, it must be hopeless and infuriating because they were pounding the pavement, getting signatures to get that on the ballot. Can you kind of talk about the no-knock warrant
Yeah.
aspect of this?
Well, I think it's devastating, to be honest with you. The criticism we hear about people who continuously protesting. I mean, there is no shortage of criticism. Oh, you guys are just out there again. Protesting doesn't make a difference. Why are you guys showing up at people's houses? These are some of the responses that I hear from the public when I am just simply covering some of these protests, right? But the reality is, I have observed more progress from people showing up and demanding change than I have from people organizing, knocking on doors, getting signatures. the truth of the matter is, George Floyd, and even if you look at with Dante Wright, okay, there were probably 4 or 5 protests that happened at Pete Orpit's home, who was the county attorney who was originally assigned to charge and try Kim Potter. Well, he had very low level charges. Protesters showed up at his home and showed up at his home and showed up at his home. And guess what happened? That case got handed off to the attorney general, and there were more charges that were brought forth. That was a trial that was not going to be televised, but protesters showed up at the judge's home. Within 72 hours, she signed off on allowing the trial to be televised. So we have seen, even with Mike Freeman, when he was deciding whether or not to charge the 4 officers involved in Floyd's death, we have seen progress. We have seen people in positions of power take action as a result of people coming out and protesting. On the contrast to your point about policy change, some of the same organizers and community leaders also did go and get more than 15,000 signatures on 8 bills that they had drafted. And what we've heard from them is the bills that passed were watered down, and then a lot of them didn't get the votes that were required. And so how can we have people who are in position of power, political leaders who influence policy, how can they in one breath say that they want change, they don't want to see another police precinct burnt down, they don't want to see businesses destroyed, but then in the other breath, they're not listening to the people who are organizing on these issues. They're not listening to the families who have lost a loved one to police violence. They're not listening to organizations like Communities United Against Police Brutality, which has been researching and collecting data on police uses of fatal force for more than 20 years. Both things cannot be true. If you really want change, you're going to have to work together with the people who are leading on this issue. And we have not seen that happen. The last thing I'll add to wrap this up, because I know I've said a lot on this, but it's very important. People are losing their lives, right? If we reflect back on the civil rights era, you'll see that even when America did have policy change, even when segregation was outlawed, it still took years before integration actually happened. And so I'm reflecting on those times because they're very parallel to what we're experiencing today. And so I think that even though it's been about 2 years almost since George Floyd was killed, I think that we still have a long journey before we actually see change in this country.
Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern Time.